to a next speaker on the program, who is Dr. Monika Maciejewska. So Monika holds a PhD stage in geography from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And now she's the postdoctoral researcher here in Brussels. And Monika will be talking about the boom in fare-free public transport. Exciting. I think all of us would actually appreciate that a lot. So let's hear and what can you say about that from a sort of a scientific point of view.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet you. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and giving this opportunity to share my research topic with all of you. I work now in Cosmopolis, which is the Center for Urban Research here in Brussels, in Geography Department at Vrije Universiteit Brussel. And I will talk about an important transport policy, which is fare-free public transport, which currently is an emerging issue in public debate and in media. But actually, it has been stirring up a controversy between researchers and policymakers for a while now. And so this is my research team. We are working on a project entitled From Low Fares to No Fares, an analysis of economic, operational, socio-spatial, and political dynamics of fare-free public transport. We are 5 people, 2 postdoctoral fellows, Wojciech Kębowski, also a Polish colleague, myself, and Madeleine Gillard, who's a PhD candidate, and let's say we are the core of the working team, and then there is Veronique Benaker and Kobe Rousseau, who are senior researchers, and they act as supervisors, keeping an eye on the progress of our research. The main objective of our project is to understand both transport-related, so economic and operational aspects of this policy, and also urban aspects, so socio-spatial and political dimensions. We would like to answer the questions about how much this policy costs, how does it operate, what is the special distribution of this policy, who and how benefits from this policy, and what are the political dynamics. Like a general goal is to provide contribution for policymakers to base their decision on science, because sometimes and avoid the risk that it's just a game of trial and error. And of course, as some of us are critical geographers, so we would like to also contribute to a general debate about the future of public transport and mobility in general. Okay, so first, to be clear about what exactly I am talking about today, what is fare-free public transport, I would like to define it, because it might seem like a simple idea of a policy, but in practice, it's quite complex due to the diversity in operation and in different contexts. So, as researchers working on this topic, first of all, we tend to call this policy fare-free public transport, not free public transport, to avoid the illusion that there's something for free, because there's not. We all pay for it, and it's just not paid at level of user and service. And then we distinguish between partial fare-free public transport and full fare-free public transport. To make it shorter, we call it partial FFPT or full FFPT. And what's the difference? So when we talk about partial FFPT, it can have social limitations. It can cover only a particular route. For example, here in Brussels, the transport is fare-free for youngsters under 30. In many cities, it's fare-free for seniors. So, for example, 60 or 65 plus. It can have time limitations. So, for example, in a special moment, like a season in cities which are winter or summer resorts, they sometimes offer public transport free of charge, but just during that period of the year. Sometimes in cities it happened the days when the air pollution is high, so for those days it's free of charge. And then another dimension, limitation dimension can be also it not covers all the lines, all the network, but it's only for a special line. Just for example, during COVID, sometimes it worked just the line going to vaccination center. But this is partial FFPD. Full FFPD is what we are working on mainly in our project, and it means that it covers most of the network. So there can be an exception, for example, the line going to the airport. It can be out, but most of the service is covered and it's free of charge. Most of the users, meaning everybody, it's universally open, or it's at least for all residents. And most of the time, and at least during 12 months, because there are of course many pilot projects, inauguration of new fleet, inauguration of new lines, but we stick to this limitation that, okay, we consider it full FFPT if it's, let's say, not short term, but at least mid-term or long-term project. Okay, so here we are looking at the chronology of implementation of this policy and the geographical distribution, let's say. And the first case ever was in the US in the 70s. Then it increased from 27 cases around the world in 2000 to 99 in 2017. And then it exceeded 250 cases in 2021. It's really hard to say how many cases there are today, because it's really a rapidly growing tendency. So, for example, from January this year, we know that Balearic and Canary Islands joined this initiative, and that Montpellier has been a while that they have been considering it. Now I know that also Washington DC is considering this option. So it's really growing and expanding policy. It has different special levels, because there are two networks country-wise, in Luxembourg and Malta. There are smaller to larger urban or metropolitan transport networks, like for example, in Albuquerque, Kansas City in the US, and in Europe it's Tallinn. I think after Luxembourg, it would be the second large case in Europe, and Dunkirk or Aubagne in France, for example. There is also an interesting case of rural transport in Spain, the whole region of Castilla-León, which is one of the biggest geographical regions in Europe. They offer fare-free public transport on demand to people living in the smallest villages where they don't have any market or health center. So they provide them the service on demand and free of charge to provide people access to these basic services. And I don't know if I will surprise you or not, but Poland is actually European leader if we account for the number of cases of municipalities that applied this policy already. So, and I promise you that I will show you a map of Poland with this case at the end. Okay, so as I said, there are different special scales which are related also to network complexity. It can go from a couple of lines of bus to really complex networks involving different means of public transport, so metro, trolleybus, and buses. And as I mentioned, also it can be universally open, but it can be limited to people officially living, so official residents of the municipality, which is also related to the modality, because if you open it for everybody, so you don't need a ticket system, but if it's limited to residents, so people who are not allowed to use it free of charge, so they need to buy tickets, and then the residents have special mobility card or card resident. It's called resident card because they have more benefits on it, not only transport. Okay, so even though this policy is growing, it's still contested and under-researched. We are trying to make like a catalog, like a database of all the cases we identify in the world, and also like with the characteristics of these municipalities. We try to understand the motivation behind implementation of the policy, what are their expectations, and what's the impact. And of course, to measure the impact, you need to know what was the situation. You need a quality data before and after. And this is where normally the problem lies, because normally, especially in smaller municipalities, there is no detailed data about it. Or the thing can be that also, it's not the only thing that changed, because if you improve the public transport network and you like the frequency is higher and then the network is broader at once. So it's really hard to say if it was a question of the price or it was the other aspect that improved, for example, the ridership. One thing that I wanted to raise, that we are also hoping that our research will contribute to the discussion of future of mobility, about the discussion about commuting transport, like seeing transport as a basic service, as we see education, as we see healthcare, for example. So in many countries, many European countries, we have free access to these goods, and we are discussing transport in this context, if it could be seen this way. Okay, there are some concerns coming from both academia and from public debate. And it's not surprising that from an economic perspective, the main concern is related to financial stability. And also there is this fear that the financial instability would create the situation that the quality of public transport lowers. But there are studies, there are academic studies saying that that it's very unlikely to happen. There are also significant saving that can be made that I will also talk about in a moment, and even there is a possibility of additional revenue generation. And probably the most important thing that I haven't mentioned is that we have to, as a society, we have to reflect on what our public fundings we would spend on. If they tell us, okay, so we need X amount of money to put public transport free of charge, but nobody asks how much money we spend for infrastructure for cars, for example. So we need to reflect on that. What is more important for us? And okay, I said that there are ways of generating even extra revenue with that, and this is of course in a specific context. This is what happened in Tallinn, where public transport has already a 10 years history, and the special context was that there were many inhabitants who were not registered officially as residents in the city, so they didn't pay their taxes there. So in the moment that the mayor offered free public transport, but only for residents, many people reflected and they said, okay, I want to use that, so I will pay my taxes here, I will enroll as a resident. So the consequence is that they actually got much more money than the free public transport costs. So this is one way of funding. Then in simple networks, we also heard that sometimes if you have 1, 2, or 3 bus lines, it's not worth investing in a ticket printing, distributing, and selling processes, and also control system. In many cases, also public transport was already highly subsidized, so there was a small step left. For example, I remember an interview with the mayor of Bełchatów, and she said, yeah, our farebox revenue was already like 12 or 14%. So I decided that we can put a little bit more here, but then the social benefit will be important. And also, for example, like an extra money can come from opening public transport for commercial ads on board or at stops. Another concern, and probably the most important, is regarding like limited contribution to transport decarbonization. And I would say that in recent studies we applied a different perspective, and we see this policy with different eyes, because we realize that this is not an environmental policy, but this is a social policy. So we shouldn't evaluate a fish that it doesn't fly, because it's basically not for that. This is a social policy. So it's great if we can switch from cars to public transport thanks to this policy, and it happens by 3 percentage points only in Tallinn before and right after. And one could say, oh, but it's a really small reduction in car use. But I would like to see another policy that the effect by 3% was so immediate. So it is very limited, and it's really criticized by this aspect. But I say again that I think this is not why this policy is for, because there are much more effective measures to decarbonize transport than this policy. This is just collateral effect, and this is a pool policy that should happen at the same time that much more effective measures of reducing car use. Okay, another concern is that FFPT is devaluating transport services. So also the evidence from the literature says that is very little evidence that there is any vandalism or insecurity related to FFPT. I also asked all the mayors or people responsible for transport in our cases in Europe. I think there were 16 in interviews. And they didn't notice any issue with vandalism or insecurity due to that. I think that around the world it happens. It used to happen, so probably it happens, but it's not because of FFPT. And the last concern is that FFPT is a useless mobility generator. But here I totally don't agree, because mobility is a derived activity. So I don't know you, but I don't know many people who just ride for fun, or because they don't have any reason. And of course I'm joking, but if we could accuse for the same any system that has weekly, monthly, or annual passes. I have an annual pass here in Brussels, and I don't excessively use public transport because it's already paid. I just use it because I went in situation when I need it. And okay, the greatest advantage is the social aspect of this policy, because it's addressing social inequalities. It can provide access to people who would not spend money on a trip. They would walk long distances, or that they would just refrain from socializing, for example, or going to the doctor, for example. So this is the most important aspect of this policy. And as promised before, this is the map of Poland with 64 networks of FFPT operating in 93 municipalities, because 50 of them are just single municipality, but then there are municipalities one next to another collaborating to provide a joint FFPT network to the inhabitants. There is like important hub in Dolnośląskie and Lower Silesia with 23 cases, 23 municipalities, and another one really clear in Wielkopolska, and then around Warsaw. Much less cases on our eastern wall. Yeah, and there will be hopefully soon a paper about much more details about FFPT in Poland. Yeah, I will skip that. Okay, so I don't want to repeat all the conclusions, but yeah, I just hope that our research will contribute to policymakers to take their decision of evidence-based, basically, and they don't want to use it as a card to before the elections, for example, because sometimes when you look at the chronology and the map, I checked them in Poland, sometimes it's like, oh wow, this is the year of election, right? Yeah, so sometimes they play the card, but that's why this is important to say, hi, okay, so how was it before? How was it now? Does it work? What impact this policy has? And not that they can sell us just a nice policy, but without any positive impact. So this is what we are doing.
Thank you. And first of all, good luck with the paper, which I suppose this is what you meant. That you're producing.
Already second revision, so hopefully it will be out soon.
Okay, and then we will definitely take some questions. I have myself some, and yeah, thank you very much for your intervention.